Today we're sitting down with worshipful brother Al Dresser, immediate past master of Richardson Lodge.
You're listening to The First Three Knocks, a Masonic podcast in the District of York, where we discuss topics for the betterment of Masonry. The opinions discussed in this podcast are those of the individual and do not represent the views of Grand Lodge or any other Masonic body. Now, here are your hosts.
A great big welcome to you, worshipful brother Al Dresser. Thanks for sitting down with us today on The First Three Knocks. Worshipful brother Dresser is our district chair of the Education Committee in York District, and also he is an aspiring DDGM. So welcome, worshipful sir. We're glad to have you on our podcast.
It's a privilege and an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Today we'd like to sort of lean into three areas in a discussion with you, of course, and talk about some of your Masonic career and some of the work that you've been doing in the district this past year, some of the great work you've been doing in the district, and also maybe a little bit around next Masonic year and what DDGM looks like for you in the coming time period. So to begin, maybe you could just give our listeners a little overview of when you joined Masonry and how it came to be.
I was made a Mason probably from the time I was very young. My uncles, my dad were Masons, and at family gatherings, for some reason they always seemed to go off and have a little conversation and then come back. And then I understood that they were talking lodge stuff. Several people that I worked with were Masons. My neighbors, I found out later, were Masons. And they were all good men. They were all the kind of man that I wanted to maybe aspire to be or certainly to associate with. So when the opportunity presented itself, my father encouraged me to, they'd never tell you anything about it. Right? Because back when I was younger, it was very much not a secret society, but certainly not one that was shared with the public. And my father encouraged me. He said, I think this is something that would be good for you, and it would be something you'd enjoy. So finally I said, well, okay, let's look into it. And so I'm from the Windsor area originally, and he was up visiting me in Stouffville, and I was amazed at how he knew the man across the street was a Mason. So he brought my neighbor over, and we talked, and he ended up being one of my sponsors.
Oh, no way.
Oh, yeah. And so that was how it started, and then, of course, I was applied, accepted, initiated. And then I went to church, and I saw this man in lodge. I saw that man in lodge. I saw this man in lodge.
They're everywhere.
I went to work, and the customers would come into the pharmacy, and I saw you at lodge. I've seen them, but I never knew they were a Mason. And then you go into the shops, and you nod. And, it was an interesting experience. Obviously, and having been a Mason for 28 years, it's had some value to me. So at the time, though, it was something that they did, and it was glad that it was recommended to me.
Yeah, that is fantastic. 28 years as a Mason, and that's a pretty decent amount of time. I think in Masonic terms, though, it's actually still pretty young. So much path ahead, I'm sure.
Well, we've had the Berry brothers were awarded their 50-year pin in our lodge all at the same time, and we've got a 70-year pin, I believe, being awarded. Yep. So I'm just almost getting to the midpoint.
Yeah. In those 28 years, maybe you could share with the listeners some of your favorite Masonic experience, some of the things that you've really enjoyed.
Okay, the first thing was my initiation. Again, no one tells you, other than we've all done this, which is not always the best recommendation for an activity. But it was the wonder of the ceremony, because it is very confusing to the initiate. But then afterwards, the warmth of the reception, and even in public, the handshake, the smile, congratulations, glad you're with us, was the first memory. The second one was my installation as master in '99. My wife and children were present to give me my master's apron, and my daughters had a look of awe and confusion and terror.
All at the same time, huh?
All at the same time, because they came in, and here were this huge array of men in aprons of all these different colors, and they were a little overwhelming for them. And my father presented my gavel.
Oh, wow.
And what's interesting, it was of a generation where you were expected to do things, and your father would say, all right, that's good. But they weren't particularly effusive. And he got up to hand me my gavel, and then he quoted Matthew 3:17. And in front of that audience, it was quite impressive. This is my son, with whom I am well pleased. And that's probably one of the most effusive things he'd said to me up to that point.
That was it.
And it was very touching. And
Yeah.
that he would say that in front of a large number of Grand Lodge officers, I thought was, okay, Pop likes this.
Yeah.
He's proud of me, which was very important. And then the last one was happened very early in my career, where one of the brethren in our lodge was taken very seriously ill, and he was driven to his doctor's appointments, and he was visited regularly and by the brethren, and they also took care of his house and assisted his wife, so virtually daily. So, and there was no fuss made of it. There was no discussion of it. No, they just did it, and, amongst themselves quietly. And he talked about how impressive, not so much impressive, but how grateful he was for how they looked after his needs, and his wife's needs, and they took care of the house for him.
That's a great experience to share with us, because we've heard that a few times over a few of the brethren that we've interviewed, and just in our travels, that brotherly love aspect really comes to the forefront
is a
when
theme.
when we're needed. And it's not even that we need to be called upon. We just know a brother is in distress, and we are always there. So that's a great experience to share for us. Thank you very much for doing that.
One of the interesting things you said there was related to your father, of course, participating in Masonry with you. Maybe you could share with our listeners those people who had the biggest impact on your Masonic career.
Well, the big three groups were my father, my uncles, and my sponsors. Murray Wagg, who was a past district deputy, Jack Watson, who passed away much too young in his 50s, were regular guys who were very involved, again, quietly in the craft, and took me under their wings.
What are the things we've been discussing with a lot of the folks we've interviewed is just having this sort of candid conversation about Masonry, and we've all kind of been there and gone through some difficulty in our Masonic career. Maybe you could share with us a little bit what you've experienced in some of the challenges in Masonry.
Oh my. The challenges haven't been great within Masonry as much as it is within your personal life. I've listened to two of the pods, or podcasts, I guess you call them, and they talk about the balance, the need for balance, and my thoughts, go back to the idea that you can fill your time up with stuff. The rubric, I guess, is the word we use, but it talks about how Masonry should come third after your private and public avocations, which is your family, your job. my idea of the balance is not equipoise. You have your faith, you have your family, you have your job. We forget about ourselves, but you have yourself to take care of. So you have 5 or 6 factors that you have to apportion your time to. There's 168 hours in a week. Excuse me. And how you fill those is something that, instead of going day to day, sort that out and make time for the important things. And at the same time, it's that opportunity cost. If you make time for this, that means that time can't be used for something else.
Exactly.
One of our challenges in terms of membership is, well, these guys go home from work and they sit on the couch and they watch TV. Well, is that the best use of your time? When having watched TV from back when it was good to now,
So true.
Yeah.
you look at it and you say, and the reason I'm watching this is, it's yes, they say it helps them de-stress, but I think it just puts you in a fog. So anyway, that's the biggest challenge. And then when I was junior warden, we moved from Stouffville to Tottenham because I'd purchased a pharmacy there and wanted to be closer to work. And the hour drive over and the hour drive back, presented a bit of a challenge. But again, it's one of those things that if you want to do something, it's amazing how you can find the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Worshipful Brother Dresser, one of the, related to that point, I had the opportunity to be in lodge with you recently in the past, I'll say 6 weeks, and you had stood up to spoke on education, and time actually was one of the topics you were discussing. And you had an excellent way of describing this, which really struck me, by the way, which was you had mentioned some newer brethren coming into Masonry having struggled with time. And you talked about guys who are able to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go play hockey. And I thought that is an excellent way to describe it. If you could come up with the time to go play hockey, getting up at 4 in the morning or staying out late to play hockey, certainly you could come up with the time to invest into Masonry. And that really particularly struck me.
There's a different perspective too, and that is the human is a pleasure-driven machine. We do what makes us feel good, whether it's sleeping, eating, being with our families. And the reason you get up at 4 in the morning to go play hockey is you like playing hockey. It's not that, well, if you can do that, my parents did that. I'm sure they said that to you too. If you got time for this, you've got time for the chores, right?
Absolutely.
But the point is, we have to explain and show that the value of the fraternity and the craft is as good as the value of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to play hockey. And yet, if it's something you really like, you will find a way to find the time.
Absolutely. Maybe you could share with the listeners some advice, maybe for the newer members or newer Masons. What would be some of the advice you would pass along?
The first one is, now that you're there, be active in the craft. Don't, okay, I'm an initiated member. Don't sit back and say, now what are you going to do for me? I'm here, entertain me. Get involved. Within the limits, there's an expression we talk about, you're called upon, within the limits of your compass, of attainment. So what are your limits? Well, they are your time. They are where are you in your career. They're definitely your family. So with those things in mind as constraints, if you wish, then what do you have time for? Get involved. Ask. Not only ask for help, but ask to become involved. Ask to assist. And the more you do, for example, your involvement with this podcast creates more energy for you, more interest for you. Keep track of the people you meet. Go to visit. Find out there's other people that are new to the craft like you are, and say hi, or be introduced to them. And now you've got someone, your friend, you got a new friend. Keep track of them. Call them once in a while, or meet them at another lodge. And over the years, all of a sudden, I've known this man for 10 years. And you can, all of a sudden, you now have new friends. You have more values. You've got people that you can either be involved with recreationally or philosophically. And you've got someone who's going to help you if you ask them. So commit and get involved.
Great advice.
I'd like to echo that statement too, because again, and I think I've said this in previous podcasts, when I became an EA in the beginning, I didn't want to bother anybody about doing the work and stuff because I didn't know we could. And it was one of my brothers here, the Rising Sun, that said, "You're never a burden to your brothers. Call us, bother us, bug us. If we have time, we'll help you. If we don't have time, we'll make that time." So again, that echoing what you just did is exactly a statement that I would hold dear to my heart and advise new Masons, first, second, third degree Masons out there. Ask. We're here to help. You have all the resources at your fingertips. And I find when we ask our more senior brethren, they are so pleased to open
Absolutely,
up and share and tell you all about what they went through, what they felt, giving you those pointers and all that fun stuff. So again, that's a great point to really share with the brethren here in the district and beyond. You're not a burden, ever. Ask. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And view their interests as your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Changing gears a little bit, obviously you've been working with the district, so you've been master of the lodge, immediate past master, and now working as chair of the Masonic education for York District. Can you share a little bit about your work with that committee?
The field of education has several components. The two greatest ones are content and skill, that you actually have to know how to learn. And of course there is the content and there's the interest. The content is accessible through the Grand Lodge Library if you're a Master Mason. A considerable amount of it is online that you can download several of the volumes in a PDF format. So you also have the distributions. I've made a couple of distributions to the masters and secretaries of explanations of the symbols and the allegory, that when you take a look at the ritual, it's pretty cut and dried, but sometimes confusing, and they explain it. For example, when we were here with the Wardens group, right, and Right Worshipful Brother Rickman mentioned that the lodge is really a large quarry. Yeah. And you start putting your head around the idea that it's not this large room, it's a massive space, allegorically. So you need those kind of explanations. The skill is learning how to learn, how to memorize. And I distributed a piece there because several brothers were having, the brethren were having difficulty because no one had shown them how. And I had the good fortune of being taught to memorize when I was very young. And there actually is a way to do it. People learn by one of four methods, and the way I was taught actually started off and uses all four methods through the course of it. So that's interesting. The progress of this is growing. Certainly within the lodges, the district deputy asks about how much education is happening at each meeting, and the lodges are picking up on that and starting to to provide some, either, if not every meeting, certainly regularly. Mm-hmm. So, which is encouraging.
Yeah, it's been very good, actually. We certainly have seen him pushing for a little more education, and In fact, it's one of the key pieces for creating interest for brethren in the lodge, and probably has been underutilized. So very simply, from my perspective, what I've seen in my travels, those lodges who are using that Masonic education piece are getting good value from it, as it creates a new, interesting topic for brethren to spend time learning something new.
And I think I'd like to also add to that. Again, I've heard a few brethren go to different lodge meetings, and you always hear about degree work, and they're very
Yeah.
pleased and whatnot. But it's those ones every once in a while, like, oh, but there was
didn't
this
know that.
Masonic education piece that was put on that night, and man, did my eyes bug
Yeah.
out, and did I have that aha moment that just wanted me to go back next month and learn more, and then we just did some more degree work. So that's been something that has been said even in our lodge discussion that we recently had too. One of the, I think, visiting Right Worshipfuls or Very Worshipfuls came through and said, we always do Masonic education, and it gives that value to our brethren, and we don't just put a piece together real quick. And again, it really just
thoughtful.
highlights,
It's
some of the
timed.
things that we always ask ourselves, and we're afraid to ask. And back to you, worshipful Brother Al Dresser. The piece that I've been reading that you put together, which again, thank you for sharing that, was that whole why memorize the ritual and how to. One of the things that I've been learning myself is kind of those, what works for me doesn't always work for others. And so I've been sharing my ways, which I think has been pretty successful with mentoring of some of the younger Masons that are coming through. And I've been using this and sharing that with them too, to say, if my way doesn't help you, look at these, because there are other ways, other tools, other resources that you could find that work for you. And so again, I look forward to these pieces that come out often, because it's another quick check to say, hey, we're doing this right, or we're not doing it right, or we should be looking at another avenue of.
Well, it's meant as a tool.
Absolutely.
And I did write in there, if you already have a way that works,
Stick to
stop
it.
reading.
Yeah,
Don't get confused.
stick to it.
Indeed.
In the year in your role, you've obviously been out to a lot of the lodges. You have participated. I mean, I've seen you everywhere. I can't think of a place you haven't been. But maybe you could share with the brethren a little bit some of the learning, some of the things that you've seen in the district that are encouraging or are maybe helpful for other lodges to institute or take on as advice.
The lodges that seem to be the most successful are the ones that embrace the social component. That it's not a Tuesday night or Wednesday night or Thursday night activity. They meet regularly for ice fishing, or they have one of the lodges in Newmarket opened, and then they called off or temporarily shut down, and they went to one of the local establishments for a dart tournament. Totally impromptu. Which, these are the things that it increases the friendship component of it, the embracing family activities. It's okay to have wives, girlfriends, children at these activities. They're part of our life, and we want to embrace them. So it seemed that those were the ones, and the ones that visited. You just can't bring that point up because enough. It's just, see these other people, share their experiences, find people who have similar experiences or different ones. So there's a lot to be said from that. And in terms of encouragement, the other encouragement that I would give to the members, young members as well as the older ones, is recommend Freemasonry to your friends and family. That, we're so concerned about the improper solicitation, but if you have somebody who you think would enjoy Freemasonry and could contribute to Freemasonry, talk to them about it.
Absolutely.
Invite them.
Yeah.
If you find they'll benefit the craft, or they will benefit from the craft, these are people that you can talk to. And yes, you can recruit them. Yes, you can say, I think this will be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
As they say, refrain from recommending anybody unless they will reflect honor on our choice. So that means you can share the experiences you're having and the values you're receiving to your friends.
Mm-hmm.
You've had experience with that.
Yeah, and that's another point that in one of our lodge discussions here at the Rising Sun, I'm pretty sure it was a right worshipful who got up and said it about 2-3 years ago. You know, we can't go and solicit, but there's nothing that stops you from having a conversation with a good friend, a neighbor, a family member, and say, hey, you know, you would make a great Mason. And just leaving that little carrot dangling in their thought for them to open up more questions and ultimately possibly ask the final one, well, how do I become a Mason? And so I very much, again, encourage that type of going-ons, and that's how I think we're going to try to strive to build this craft even further, especially in today, because everybody's so busy doing all kinds of important things, but at the same time, non-important things. So it's important for us to take that time to share what we're able to, and also to maybe not non-solicit, but again, just, hey, you would make a good Mason. And invite them to our social gatherings, as you mentioned. Invite them to our friend of friends. Invite them to our community gatherings so they can see what we do. It's not just in here and get to the business, or do the degree and get some
It's
work.
another aspect. It's another angle.
Aspect. Yeah. Absolutely. So I certainly agree to that, and would encourage everybody out there to do the same.
Changing gears a little bit here, so obviously aspiring to DDGM in the next upcoming Masonic year, and maybe you could share with us a little bit what's motivated you to put your name forward?
Well, I hadn't considered it as part of a career plan. I was the master at Richardson Lodge twice. I had 4 daughters that, you know, going through grade school and high school and university.
You survived?
I did.
Thrived?
You know, I had a business to run, so it was enough to get to Lodge and some of the activities and participate. To the opportunity or the concept of advancing into a leadership role beyond my lodge just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And then a few years ago, about 2 years before he passed to the Grand Lodge above, at the annual communication, Most Worshipful Brother C. Edwin Drew, who was a frequent visitor to Richardson Lodge, had been at both of my installations, mentioned to me at the Royal York. He saw me, we chatted a bit, and he encouraged me. He said, I would like to see you there. And that certainly opened my eyes. I mean, when that man said, I think you've got a chance to do the job, you certainly...
Feels like an endorsement?
You look at him and, really? Me? Okay. Subsequently, there were other past district deputies who expressed thoughts that, really? Why haven't you done this yet? So when you have enough people, you know, eventually the hammer hits. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there's the idea that, okay, where am I in my life? Well, I'm semi-retired. I work just enough shifts to keep my pharmacy license. I have, my 4 daughters are off on their own families now. I have the support of my wife in this, which is key.
Yep, critical, very much.
So, you know, she said, you know, life has changed, and now there's an expression she has about having an extra cup of sugar to give. That when you're busy doing these things, you don't have that, you know, whether it's comforting somebody, assisting somebody, and you just, you know, they've come for that cup of sugar and you don't have it. Well, now I do. I've got the time, I've got the resources, I've got the interest now, and certainly I've got the support. So that, I guess, would be the motivation that...
the time is right.
The time is right to contribute to the craft at this level. and the ability will depend on the brethren of the district. You know, I can say, hey, I'm your guy. No, I can't say that. But certainly if they don't say, you're the one we want this time, then I won't be. You know, I feel that I've got something to offer. They'll decide whether they want it or not, right?
What do you see some of the priorities for the district in the upcoming year? I mean, we've seen a lot of progress and things being worked out up to this point. For you, for example, if you're successful becoming the DDGM, what do you see as some of the key priorities for the district moving forward?
Well, the key priority is certainly the long-distance planning, or the long-range planning. That where do we want to be? This was something that we always discussed at my kitchen table with the business, and my children used to tease me because one of my favorite expressions was, well, we are now at the point where in 5 years, well, you can imagine to high school students or grade school students,
It's about 100 years from now.
what are you talking about? So we have long-term planning. We have long-term planning through Grand Lodge. Again, Right Worshipful Brother Rickman is encouraging each lodge to have a written long-term plan.
Yep.
And as we get to that stage, then we have to get into written annual reviews of the long-range plan. That the plan may change. I mean, if you don't have a plan, you're
Yep.
just floating.
Right.
If you have a plan, doesn't mean you can't change it, but you have to review it.
Absolutely.
So again, the continuation of that, get that, remain viable, remain vibrant. That is key. Increasing membership, particularly young ones. New members. Now, when I say young ones, I mean, a 40-year-old is relatively young to Masonry. You know, I mean, it's great to have the 20-year-olds. I was at a lodge this past week, just as a visit, not an official visit. I was just visiting. And in the front row, they had 6 entered apprentices, like 6 new initiates sitting in lodge. And I thought, this bodes well.
Yeah.
You know, this is a lodge that's going to grow as long as we keep them busy and give them stuff to do. So that's the key. Grow the membership, keep them active, keep them educated, and plan for where we want to be.
Sort of along the same line, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges in our district and Masonry in general?
Communication.
Yeah.
The Masonry in general is very strong. We don't have the numbers, and when you have a lot of numbers, you can have some weaknesses and the numbers will compensate. It's strong, and we have to maintain its strength. However, communication with the public, communication within the membership, you realize that this podcast is available to the public. If you search it, it's there. My daughters were listening to it and told me about it.
Any feedback for the podcast?
Later. So communicate the relevance of Masonry in a distracted world. Right now, it's noisy and it's distracting. Everybody has an iPhone. Someone said, well, yeah, you text the message. No one uses a phone for telephone calls anymore. So we're noisy. We talked about it earlier with fitting things into your 168 hours. Don't do stuff, to be busy. That busyness. Masonry has time, long-term values. It's a stability in this noisy world that we should be communicating. That as busy as we are and as technological as we are all mortal, and we have to weigh how we're going to live our life with the understanding that, the flowery meads, the lovely meadows, and the rough edges. So where are you on that? And how do you get there? And how do you go through it? What are the values that we can give in our reflections? So it's that challenge is also our opportunity. You know, there's the opportunity for growth, contribute to the ritual. At our lodge, we like to tell the new initiate, okay, we want you to learn these 3 pieces, very short pieces, so that when someone else is initiated, you can do that part. You don't have to be a master mason or an officer in the lodge. Mm-hmm. So they start to become involved. Contribute to committees within the lodge.
Yeah.
Again, it's that, don't be afraid to ask. You know, give me something to do, I'm bored. Okay, come along.
There's lots of work to do.
That
There's
could be
lots
dangerous.
to do. Mm-hmm. Social media to communicate our message. These podcasts will provide a great deal of information to the general public. And this is where your editor has to make sure that it's suitable for the public. But again, telling people about its values, telling people about how it can be an assistance to their life. And the biggest challenges are also our biggest opportunities. You know, to attend social functions, to be a little more visible, to present itself as a solid foundation, right? Excellent. That this is something that's worth your time, and will give you value as proportionate to the time you give it.
Mm-hmm. We were just discussing that earlier on today. Actually, the investment that you put in is really what you take out.
Absolutely.
And all lodges need that, don't they?
I'm starting to hear the same comments from the same themes and comments coming from the different brethren that we're interviewing, of those challenges being that balance of that times and apportioning them properly, and then also when it comes down to what do you see some of the bigger challenges within the district, that communication, right? How do we get that information out there where we don't now have that excuse, well, I didn't know about that, or I didn't know how to get there, or I didn't know that was even a thing today. So I think we are certainly seeing a lot of good strides in filling these gaps and getting those bridges set. It's now, let's get those brothers to walk over those bridges and make it to the other side. It's really
interesting, you know, these 2 topics that we've been discussing is communication and appropriation of time. That's very interesting, because that really is a life challenge, isn't it? That is everybody's challenge in life. And one of the things I love about Masonry is it shows us how to do that.
It does.
How to be better at that, how to become competent, how to reflect upon it. And that's what I love about Masonry. We spend time thinking about these things so we can be better at them. So it's really kind of ironic, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, Worshipful Brother Al Dresser, is this piece with the Grand Lodge. How do you see Grand Lodge fitting into the bigger picture for York District in the future?
Grand Lodge is an amazing resource. If you want to know something, you get in touch with either the librarian or the Grand Secretary, because that is your access point. And I've done it a couple of times where they get you to the person with the resource. We've been to a couple of presentations by Grand Lodge members, which enlightens everybody. And we were at one in Brantford earlier this year, this Masonic year, and Masons from 5 different districts were present. They present experience, they present knowledge, and they present resources. Everything from the ritual right down to benevolence, and the Masonic Foundation, which is a subsidiary of Grand Lodge, provides support to the general public as well, and a lot of people don't know that. Yeah. One of our challenges is we do good work and we don't tell people we're doing it. When my youngest granddaughter was born, we were all set to take her home. We were there with the parents, and because we were babysitting the other granddaughter, and they said, oh, well, we have to wait for the hearing test. So we sat there and we waited, and I found out subsequently that this was originally started and funded by Masons.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I knew nothing about it. Now, eventually, we proved its worth, and the government took over, the Ministry of Health took over funding the hearing tests. But it would have been so nice if I had known, oh, by the way, we're waiting for Adrienne to have her hearing tested. Do you realize that was started by Masons?
No, I didn't. Wow.
No. And just to be able to say that, well, I had no idea.
Right.
And I'm a candidate for DDGM. So, we do stuff and we don't tell people
Right.
what we're doing. We tell each other, here's what we want to raise funds for or to develop support for. But we don't take any credit for those good things that we do. So but as far as Grand Lodge, they provide expertise in so many ways. They take care of benevolence for Masons and Masonic families. They take care of support for the general public that people aren't aware of through the Masonic Foundation.
Good. Well, thank you for all that deep insight. Brother Scovio, let's take a look at the Secretary's desk here of what's coming up. On April 30th, of course, is the Grand Master's reception, and I believe you need to contact Scott Rickman for tickets for that still.
Yes, tickets will not be available at the door. I think he might have a few left, so you want to call him right away if you want to attend. Following that, May 1st is Corinthian Lodge's official visit. Don't have the exact details yet as to any degree work or exactly when banquet will be, but again, the app and Facebook will be updated, so we'll share that as soon as we have that information.
And coming up on Wednesday, May 8th, Wellington Lodge will be having their installation. So I think that kind of kicks off the installation part of our year, which is interesting.
About to turn that corner and get that all going. Just to come back a bit, also May 1st, there's kind of a double night. If you're looking at initiating a long-range planning group or committee in your own lodge, highly recommend trying to split yourself in half and attending Malone Lodge, because May 1st, Grand Lodge will be coming to put on a workshop or a seminar there specifically for long-range planning. So I'll be there myself.
You'll be there,
for a
yes.
seminar.
Yes, definitely. And on Tuesday, May 14th, Delta Lodge will be having their official visit here at the Aurora Temple.
And then finally, it's a little ways away, but it's a very excellent event to be a part of. We were lucky enough to go up and do a 60-year pin. This one is a 70-year pin, presented to Brother Art Moody, and it's both Union Lodge and Roland Lodge that are going to be putting in the joint effort to do that for this brother. So highly recommend that if you are not thinking about it, you should. It's going to be up in Mount Albert. And again, it's going to be a wonderful night, 7:30 start.
And one last one I have to throw in here on May 27th, Zaradatha Lodge official visit. Why is this an important evening, Brother Scovio?
Oh, wait a minute. I think we know it's a second degree, and I think it's our talented producer / editor, Steve Sprott, going up. We won't be missing that at all.
Please do. This one.
And I think that clears our secretary's desk for this podcast. So what a great podcast we've had here tonight with worshipful Brother Alan Dresser. We're going to start to say our goodbyes, but before we do, we have one last question for you, worshipful sir. And that is, what would you like the brethren to know about you? Any fun facts, any down and dirt? I don't know. What can you share with us?
Well, there was some dirt there. I umpired the Blue Jays of the American League of Professional Baseball.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. No.
Yes, I did. I did so. During the umpire strike in the 90s, I umpired the Blue Jays. It was a great thrill.
Amazing.
As my wife called it, my major league thrill. And through the great support of my wife and family, I thank them for their support on this journey.
Excellent.
Well, with that, worshipful Brother Alan Dresser, we very much thank you for coming tonight and spending time with us. You shared some great insights on certainly your Masonic career, the work that you're doing for the district, and of course, DDGM. So we thank you for joining us this evening. Join us next time on The First Three Knocks.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The First Three Knocks. Happy to meet, sorry to part, happy to meet again.